The funeral was yesterday. Today, I found the eviction notice on my bedroom door, typed on crisp legal paper, as if they couldn't wait 24 hours after putting my father in the ground before trying to kick me out of my childhood home. My name is Bianca, and I've spent 29 years in this house. Every crack in the ceiling, every creak in the floorboards, they're as familiar to me as my own heartbeat. But right now, walking these halls feels like navigating a foreign country where I've suddenly become an unwelcome tourist. Darling, could you keep it down? We're trying to have a family meeting. Esme's voice drifted from my father's study. No, her study now, apparently. The way she emphasized family made it clear I wasn't included in that category. I paused outside the door, hearing the murmur of voices. My step-siblings, Faith and Tyron, were in there with her. 3 vultures, picking over the bones of my father's legacy before his body was even cold. The real estate agent can come next week, Faith was saying. We should get this place listed before the market shifts. I pressed my hand against the solid oak door, remembering how many times I'd knocked on it as a child, seeking my father's attention. After he married Esme, those knocks went unanswered more and more frequently. Bianca? A voice behind me made me turn. Milton Wilkinson stood there, briefcase in hand, looking every bit the expensive lawyer in his tailored suit. I was just coming to find you. We need to discuss some matters regarding your father's estate. I assume that's related to this? I held up the eviction notice, keeping my voice steady. He smiled, the kind of smile that probably cost his clients $500 an hour. Among other things, perhaps we could set up a meeting for tomorrow, say 10 a.m. at my office. Wilkinson LLP. I read from his business card. The same firm that handled my father's will. Precisely. He nodded, already turning away. Don't worry, we'll sort everything out. I watched him walk away, his expensive shoes clicking on the hardwood floors my grandmother had selected decades ago. The same grandmother who taught me that the quietest people were often the most dangerous. The study door opened, and Esme emerged, her children flanking her like designer bookends. Oh, Bianca, dear, I hope you're doing all right. Her sympathy sounded as artificial as her highlights. I'm fine, I said, noting how Faith was already wearing one of my mother's antique bracelets. Just processing the eviction notice. It's nothing personal, Tyron offered, adjusting his glasses. Just business. Jerry, he wanted things this way. I thought about the letter, hidden in my grandmother's old jewelry box upstairs, the one she'd read to me 5 years ago, making me memorize every word. I'm sure he did, I said quietly. We can help you find a nice apartment, Faith added, her smile not reaching her eyes. Something cozy, perfect for starting fresh. I nodded, watching them sweep past me toward the main staircase. They moved like they owned the place, which, according to the papers Milton was undoubtedly going to show me tomorrow, they probably did. What they didn't know was that ownership could be a complicated thing. My grandmother had taught me that too, in the quiet hours we'd spent together before she passed away. Never show your hand too early, she'd said, dealing cards across her antique coffee table. Let them think they've won. That's when they make mistakes. My phone buzzed. A text from Greta, my old college friend turned lawyer. Got your message. Don't sign anything tomorrow. Trust me. I slipped the phone back into my pocket and headed upstairs to my room. The eviction notice crackled in my hand as I folded it carefully and placed it in my desk drawer. Through my window, I could see Esme in the garden, already pointing at features she wanted to change. Another text from Greta. Just check the records. You're going to want to see this. Meeting tomorrow? I typed back a single word. Yes. Downstairs, I could hear Faith and Tyron laughing about something. The sound echoed through the house, my house, like they were already celebrating their victory. I sat on my bed, running my fingers over the familiar pattern of my grandmother's quilt, and smiled. Tomorrow, Milton Wilkinson would try to tell me I had no claim to my home. Tomorrow, they'd all learn what it meant to underestimate the quiet girl who'd spent her life watching and waiting. But for now, I just listened to them laugh. Milton's office smelled like expensive leather and arrogance. He sat behind a mahogany desk that probably cost more than most people's cars, while Esme and her children arranged themselves on the plush chairs beside me like they were posing for a family portrait, one that clearly didn't include me. First, let me express my deepest condolences, Milton began, shuffling papers with manicured hands. Your father was a remarkable man. He certainly was, Esme dabbed at dry eyes with a monogrammed handkerchief. Such a shame how confused he became near the end. I kept my face neutral, remembering my grandmother's words. Let them fill the silence. People reveal themselves when they're uncomfortable. Now, regarding the will, Milton continued, your father made some significant changes in his final months. He felt, given your successful career in real estate law, that you were more than capable of establishing yourself independently. Faith reached over and patted my hand. We all know how strong and independent you are, Bianca. I pulled my hand away, watching Milton extract a document from a leather folder. The estate, including the main residence and all associated properties, has been transferred to Esme and her children, he said, his tone carefully measured. You've been allocated a thank you sum of $50,000, which we feel is quite generous given the circumstances. The circumstances? I kept my voice quiet. Your father mentioned you'd grown distant in recent years, Esme interjected. He worried you didn't need him anymore. A memory flashed. My father's study door locked again, while Esme's voice murmured inside. Me, standing there with his birthday gift in hand, hearing them laugh about something I wasn't meant to hear. We're prepared to help with your transition, Tyron offered, looking bored, though you'll need to vacate the premises within 30 days. Milton slid the document toward me. If you'll just sign here, acknowledging receipt of the terms. I thought about my grandmother's letter, sealed in her distinctive blue envelope, about the quiet afternoons we'd spent in her study, reviewing papers I hadn't fully understood at the time. Interesting, I said. The word hung in the air like smoke. Milton's pen paused mid-tap against his desk. I'm sorry, he said. It's interesting that you're using the Anderson precedent for property transfer without consideration of pre-existing trust structures. The pen stopped tapping entirely. Milton's expression flickered. I don't follow, he said, but his tone had lost its patronizing edge. You will. I stood up, smoothing my skirt. My lawyer will be in touch. Your lawyer? Faith laughed. Bianca, don't be difficult. This is what Dad wanted. Jerry was very clear about his wishes, Esme added, her voice hardening. Don't embarrass yourself with pointless legal challenges. I picked up my bag, feeling the weight of my grandmother's letter inside. You know what my grandmother used to say about wishes? She said they're like butterflies, beautiful to look at, but terrible things to build a house on. Milton was already reaching for his phone. Perhaps we should discuss this further. No need, I cut him off. Greta Morrison will handle all future communications. Greta Morrison? The color drained from Milton's face. From Morrison and Associates? The same. I headed for the door, then paused. Oh, and Esme, that bracelet Faith's wearing, the sapphire one from the master bedroom. What about it? Esme snapped. It's not part of the estate. It belongs to my grandmother's trust. I'd like it returned by end of day. Faith's hand flew to her wrist. But Dad gave it to me. No, he didn't. Because he couldn't. Check the inventory from 2018. I smiled, channeling my grandmother's quiet steel. And while you're at it, you might want to check a few other things too. I left them sitting there, their perfect family portrait cracking at the edges. In the elevator, my phone buzzed with a text from Greta. Papers filed. You should see Milton's face when he gets the injunction. Another memory surfaced. My grandmother, teaching me chess on rainy afternoons. The best moves, she'd said, are the ones your opponent doesn't see coming until it's too late. I stepped out into the sunshine, hearing Faith's voice rise in panic from the office above. They thought they were dealing with a grieving daughter, too broken to fight back. They thought wrong. My phone buzzed again. Greta, ready to show them what a real estate lawyer can do? I typed back 2 words. Make it hurt. Behind me, Milton's office door slammed open. I heard hurried footsteps, but I didn't turn around. Let them chase. Let them worry. Let them finally understand that the quiet girl they dismissed had learned from the best. The game was just beginning. Your grandmother was a goddamn genius, Greta said, spreading documents across her office desk. Look at this structure. Shell companies, blind trusts, property holdings dating back 15 years. She built you a fortress while they weren't even watching. I picked up a deed from 2008. She knew this day would come. 5 years before your father married Esme, Greta nodded, her red hair catching the afternoon light. Your grandmother started moving assets the moment that woman walked into your lives. The memory hit me like a wave. I was 24, sitting in my grandmother's sunroom. She'd called me over urgently, holding a blue envelope. Listen carefully, sweetheart, she'd said, her voice strong despite her age. I'm going to read you something, and I need you to remember every word. I blinked back to the present as Greta slapped another folder down. They have no idea what's coming. That trust your grandmother set up, it owns controlling interest in 3 of the properties Esme thinks she just inherited. How did Milton miss this? Because your grandmother used Aaron to set it up. You remember Aaron? The financial manager everyone underestimated because he drove that beat-up Toyota? I smiled. Another of my grandmother's lessons: never trust anyone who spends more on their car than their education. Here's where it gets beautiful, Greta continued, pulling out a spreadsheet. The mortgage on Esme's precious vacation home, the one she got in the will, the trust holds the note. We can call it due any time. My phone buzzed. A text from Faith. We need to talk, please. Things are getting out of hand. I showed it to Greta, who snorted. They're starting to sweat. Good. Want to make them sweat more? What did you have in mind? She pulled out another document, this one bearing yesterday's date. Remember that development project Tyron's been bragging about? The one where he's planning to convert those rental properties into luxury Airbnbs? I nodded. Well, those properties? They're zoned residential only. No commercial use allowed. And guess who sits on the zoning board? Aaron, I said, finally understanding why my grandmother had insisted I keep in touch with her old financial manager. Bingo. Greta leaned back, satisfaction written across her face. Your grandmother didn't just leave you money, Bianca. She left you leverage. Another memory surfaced. My grandmother teaching me to play poker, using chocolate chips as betting tokens. The cards don't matter as much as knowing when to play them, she'd said, dealing another hand. So what's our next move? I asked. Greta's smile turned predatory. We let them dig themselves deeper. Tyron's already spent money on architects for those Airbnbs. Faith's been shopping for furniture for the main house. And Esme? She's already tried to list 2 properties she doesn't actually control. My phone buzzed again. Esme this time. This hostility is unnecessary. We're family. Let's discuss this like adults. Family, I muttered. Now they want to talk about family. Speaking of family, Greta said, pulling out one final document. Remember that antique collection your father kept in the study? The one Esme's been planning to auction? I nodded, thinking of the vintage watches and rare books my grandfather had collected. Your grandmother transferred ownership to the trust in 2010. If they try to sell even one piece, we can have them charged with theft. A knock at the office door interrupted us. Aaron walked in, still wearing his familiar, worn blazer. Sorry I'm late. Traffic was terrible. He set his battered briefcase on Greta's desk. But I brought something you might want to see. He pulled out a stack of papers, yellowed with age. Your grandmother asked me to hold these until the right time. They're the original property deeds, with some interesting notations about maintenance costs and tax obligations. Greta snatched them up, her eyes widening as she read. Oh, this is perfect. Esme hasn't paid property tax on any of these holdings since your father died. She's already in default. My phone buzzed one more time. Tyron, the contractors are here. Please don't do this. I looked at the message, then at the document spread across Greta's desk. My grandmother's careful planning, laid out like a chess game she'd started years ago. What do you want to do? Greta asked, pen poised. I thought about the eviction notice, about Faith wearing my mother's bracelet, about all the locked doors and excluded moments. Send them a dinner invitation, I said. Greta raised an eyebrow. A dinner invitation? Yes, at the house, tomorrow night. I picked up the property tax documents. Let's give them one last chance to be civil, before we show them exactly what my grandmother taught me about family. Aaron smiled, adjusting his worn blazer. Your grandmother would be proud. No, I said, thinking of all her quiet lessons. She'd say I'm just getting started. The locksmith was already working on the front door when I pulled into the driveway. Faith stood nearby, tapping her foot impatiently while Tyron leaned against his BMW, pretending to read something on his phone. Excuse me, I called out, walking up with my coffee in hand. What exactly are you doing? The locksmith glanced between me and Faith, his tools pausing. Ma'am, I was hired to— Change the locks, Faith cut in, as is our right. This is our property now. I took a slow sip of my coffee. Sir, could I see your work order? Don't answer her, Tyron snapped, finally looking up from his phone. We don't need to explain anything. I pulled out my phone, dialed, and put it on speaker. Hi, Officer Roberts. Remember that trespassing situation we discussed? Faith's smug expression faltered. What are you doing? Yes, ma'am, came the officer's voice. Would you like me to send a unit? The locksmith started packing his tools. I don't want any trouble. Neither do I said pleasantly. That's why I'm giving everyone here exactly 2 minutes to leave before Officer Roberts arrives to enforce the standing property order. Property order? Tyron pushed off his car. What property order? A police cruiser turned onto our street, lights flashing. The one my lawyer filed yesterday, I said. The one prohibiting any modifications to the property until ownership is legally settled. Faith's face turned red. This is ridiculous. Dad left us this house. Did he? I watched the cruiser park. Or did Esme convince a sick man to sign papers he didn't understand? Officer Roberts stepped out, adjusting his belt. Everything okay here, Miss Bianca? Just a misunderstanding, I said. These people were leaving. The locksmith was already gone, his truck pulling away. Tyron grabbed Faith's arm. Come on. This isn't worth getting arrested over. This isn't over, Faith hissed as they retreated to Tyron's car. No, I agreed. It's not. I waited until they drove away before turning to Officer Roberts. Thank you for coming so quickly. No problem. Your grandmother was always good to this department. He tipped his hat. We've got patrols watching the property, just like you requested. Later that afternoon, I sat in my favorite cafe downtown, pretending to work on my laptop while Faith and Tyron held court at a nearby table, loud enough for everyone to hear. That hideous study needs to go first, Faith was saying. All those awful old books and that prehistoric furniture. Already got a buyer for the art collection, Tyron added, and wait till you see the plans for the rental properties. High-end vacation rentals. We'll make a fortune. My phone buzzed, Greta sending files. I opened them, scanning quickly as Faith and Tyron continued their performance. Mother's already talking to interior designers, Faith announced. That house needs a complete overhaul. No more of that dated, stuffy. Excuse me. I stood up, walking to their table. Thought you might want to see this. I placed the documents Greta had sent in front of them. Property records, mortgage statements, tax assessments. What is this? Tyron picked up a paper, his face going pale. Proof that your mother defaulted on 3 mortgages the moment she tried to claim them. I pointed to the relevant lines. And since my trust holds the notes. Faith grabbed another document. This can't be legal. Oh, but it is. Your mother's been playing with the borrowed money for years. Did you really think those properties were free and clear? But Dad was sick, I cut her off, and Esme took advantage. Unfortunately for her, my grandmother saw it coming years ago. Tyron's hands were shaking. The development plans, I already paid the architects. Might want to get a refund. I gathered the papers. Those properties aren't zoned for commercial use. Never will be. Faith stood up so fast her chair fell over. You think you're so clever? Mother will what? I asked softly. File for bankruptcy? Because that's coming too. I'm calling in all her debts. Every single one. The cafe had gone silent, everyone pretending not to watch. You can't do this, Tyron whispered. I already have. I turned to leave, then paused. Oh, and Faith? That artwork you're planning to sell? Try it. Art theft is a felony in this state. My phone buzzed again as I walked out. Greta sending a thumbs up emoji. She'd been watching through the cafe window across the street. Another message followed. Esme just called Milton in a panic. Want to guess what she found in her mail today? I smiled, thinking of the property tax notices that had been delivered that morning. How long until she figures out she's broke? Hours? Maybe minutes. Want to twist the knife? I thought about my grandmother's chess lessons, about patience, about waiting for the perfect moment. Not yet, I typed back. First, let's see who shows up for dinner tomorrow night. I set the dining room table exactly as my grandmother had taught me. Fine china, crystal glasses, silver perfectly aligned. The projector screen was discreetly set up at the far end of the room, waiting. They arrived together, Esme, Faith, and Tyron, dressed like they were attending a business meeting rather than a family dinner. Their forced smiles couldn't hide their tension. What a lovely gesture, Esme said, handing her coat to the housekeeper, the same one who'd worked for my grandmother for 20 years. Though I must say, we were surprised by the invitation. Were you? I gestured to their seats. I thought it was time we had a proper conversation about transitions. Faith fingered her water glass nervously, noticeably bare of my mother's bracelet. Bianca, about yesterday. Let's eat first, I interrupted, nodding to the housekeeper. Martha's made Dad's favorite pot roast. The first course arrived in uncomfortable silence. I watched Esme push her food around, noticed how Tyron's hand shook slightly as he reached for his wine. So, Esme finally said, your lawyer has been quite active lately. Has she? I took a sip of wine. I hadn't noticed. This hostility isn't necessary, Tyron cut in. We can work something out. I picked up a remote control. Actually, that's why I invited you here tonight. I wanted to share some family memories. The projector hummed to life, and suddenly the dining room wall filled with home video footage. My father, younger and healthier, playing with me in the garden. Oh, how sweet, Faith said, relief evident in her voice. Is this some kind of... The footage changed. Now it showed my father in his study, looking confused and frail, while Esme spoke to him in a sharp whisper. The timestamp showed 3 months ago. Esme's fork clattered against her plate. Where did you get that? The house has security cameras, I said calmly. Grandmother had them installed years ago. She never trusted you, you see. Another clip began playing. Esme arguing with my father about the will, his face distressed as she waved papers at him. Turn it off, Tyron demanded. Why? We're just getting to the good part. I forwarded to another clip. Faith and Tyron ransacking my mother's jewelry box the day after the funeral. Faith pushed back from the table. This is harassment. No, I said, pressing pause. This is evidence of coercion, of theft, of elder abuse. Would you like to see what else I have? Esme's composed facade cracked. What do you want? I pulled out an envelope and placed it on the table. Inside are default notices for 3 properties you thought you inherited. You have 30 days to vacate. You can't, Tyron started. I can. I do. I will. I laid out more papers. Here's the documentation showing the art collection belongs to my grandmother's trust. Here's the proof that you failed to pay property taxes. And here, I pulled out one final document, is a copy of the original will, the one Dad signed before you convinced him to change it. Esme's face had gone white. Those properties, they're all we have. No, they're all you thought you had. There's a difference. I stood up, walking to the projector. Would you like to see the footage of you forging Dad's signature on the bank documents? The police would find it fascinating. You're bluffing, Faith whispered. I played the clip. The color drained from Esme's face. Martha, I called out, could you please show our guests out? I believe they've lost their appetite. As they stood, shaking, I held up one final envelope. Oh, and Esme, this contains proof that you've been embezzling from your charity foundation. I'm sure the board would love to see it. You vindictive little, she started. Careful, I cut her off. Remember who taught me to be vindictive? You spent years showing me exactly how cruel family could be. Consider this your final lesson. They fled like shadows from sunlight, leaving their dinner untouched. Through the window, I watched them argue in the driveway before speeding away in Tyron's BMW. My phone buzzed. Greta, how'd it go? Exactly as planned, I replied. How long until the charity board receives those documents? First thing tomorrow. Want me to send the property tax notices to the county assessor too? I looked around the dining room, at the family portraits watching from the walls, at my grandmother's knowing smile in each one. Yes, I typed back. It's time to end this. Martha appeared at my elbow. Would you like me to clear the table, Miss Bianca? Not yet, I said, sitting back down at my place. I think I'll finish my dinner first. After all, I smiled, raising my glass to my grandmother's portrait. This is still my house. The doorbell rang at midnight. I knew who it was before I opened the door. Esme stood there, mascara smeared, clutching her designer handbag like a shield. We need to talk, she said, pushing past me into the foyer. This has gone far enough. I closed the door quietly, watching her pace on the antique rug. Has it? The charity board called an emergency meeting. Her voice cracked. They're auditing everything. Everything, Bianca. Isn't that what boards are supposed to do? She whirled to face me. I can offer you money, more than that pitiful sum in the will. Name your price. My price? I leaned against the doorframe. For what exactly? To make this go away. She dug through her bag, pulling out a checkbook. 200,000 right now. I smiled, thinking of my grandmother's voice. Money doesn't buy class, dear. It just rents it. The vacation house, Esme continued desperately. You can have it. Just call off the dogs. The house you mortgaged 3 times over? I shook my head. No thanks. Her phone buzzed. She glanced at it and let out a small sob. The board, they're suspending me pending investigation. Karma's interesting, isn't it? Karma? She laughed hysterically. You engineered this. You and that grandmother of yours. Always plotting. Always watching. Heavy footsteps on the stairs made us both turn. Tyron appeared, looking disheveled. Mother? What are you doing here? Your mother's offering to buy my silence, I said, with money she doesn't have. He stepped into the foyer. The architects called. They're demanding payment for the plans, but all our accounts are frozen. Frozen? Esme whispered. Standard procedure in fraud investigations, I explained. The charity board is being thorough. Tyron slumped against the wall. Faith's hysterical. The gallery she hired for the art auction is threatening to sue for breach of contract. That's not my problem, I said. Not your problem? Esme advanced on me. You're destroying our lives. No, I stepped forward, meeting her glare. I'm taking back what's mine. There's a difference. More footsteps. Faith this time, mascara rivaling her mother's. The rental property? There are people at the rental property. County assessors, I nodded, doing their job. They're changing the locks. She grabbed Tyron's arm. All our stuff is in there. House should have paid those property taxes, I said. But you were too busy planning renovations that would never happen. Esme sank onto the stairs, her designer dress crumpling. Please, we're family. Family? I walked to the study door, my father's study, and opened it. Family doesn't manipulate dying men into changing their wills. Family doesn't steal inheritances or forge signatures. We can fix this, Tyron pleaded. Together. We'll find a way. There is no we, I cut him off. There never was. You made sure of that years ago. Faith started crying. Where are we supposed to go? That's not my problem either. I checked my watch. But you need to leave. Now. This isn't over. Esme stood, trying to gather her dignity. We'll fight this in court. With what money? I asked quietly. Your assets are frozen. Your reputation is ruined. Your lawyer dropped you this afternoon. Yes, Milton called to tell me himself. They stood there, these people who tried to erase me from my own home, looking lost and small in the grand foyer. Get out, I said, all of you, before I call the police. They shuffled toward the door, a broken parade of designer clothes and shattered arrogance. But Esme paused at the threshold, turning back with venom in her eyes. Your father would be ashamed, she spat. My father stopped being himself the moment you started poisoning his mind, I replied. But my grandmother, she'd be proud. She taught me everything I needed to know about people like you. I closed the door on their faces, listening to their footsteps fade into the night. My phone buzzed. Greta sending updates. County seized the rental property. Charity board voted to pursue criminal charges. Art gallery filed their lawsuit. Want me to keep going? I walked to my father's study, running my hand along his desk. Tomorrow, I'd start going through his papers, trying to piece together the man he was before Esme. But tonight? No, I typed back to Greta. I think they've had enough for one day. Another text came through. This one from Aaron. Your grandmother left one more envelope. Said to give it to you when the storm passes. Ready for it? I looked around the study at the space that was finally truly mine again. At the home my grandmother had helped me protect without ever living to see the victory. Yes, I replied. I'm ready. The quiet house settled around me, its familiar creaks and groans welcoming me home. Outside, I heard Tyron's BMW start up and drive away for the last time. The storm hadn't just passed. I was the storm. The courthouse buzzed with tension as I walked through the security checkpoint. Reporters clustered near the entrance, but I moved past them without comment. My grandmother always said silence spoke louder than words. Courtroom 3 was already packed. Esme, Faith, and Tyron huddled with their new lawyer, a desperate-looking man in an off-the-rack suit. Milton sat in the back, pretending to be invisible. Greta met me at our table, red hair pulled back severely. Ready? Born ready, I said, setting down my briefcase. The judge entered, a no-nonsense woman who'd known my grandmother from charity work. As everyone settled, I caught Esme shooting me a venomous look. Your Honor, Esme's lawyer began, this case is a simple family dispute that's been blown out of proportion. Simple? Greta stood. Your Honor, we have documented evidence of fraud, coercion, and elder abuse. We have video footage of the defendant forging signatures. We have— Objection, Esme's lawyer sputtered. Those videos were obtained without consent. In a private residence, the judge noted, where the owner had every right to install security cameras. Overruled. Faith started crying quietly. Tyron stared at his hands. Furthermore, Greta continued. We have proof that Mrs. Gibson systematically manipulated her husband's finances while he was mentally incapacitated. The evidence mounted like a tidal wave. Bank records, medical reports, witness statements from household staff. With each new document, Esme seemed to shrink further into herself. And finally, Greta pulled out one last file. We have the original will, witnessed and notarized, showing Mr. Gibson's true intentions before his illness. This is persecution. Esme suddenly stood, her voice shrill. We're the victims here. This ungrateful girl. Mrs. Gibson, the judge cut in sharply. Sit down, or I'll have you removed. The next hour passed in a blur of legal terms and rulings. When the judge finally spoke her decision, it fell like a hammer. The court finds in favor of the plaintiff. All properties and assets are to be returned to their rightful owner under the terms of the original will and existing trust structure. Faith collapsed into Tyron's arms. Esme sat frozen. Furthermore, the judge continued, given the evidence of financial misconduct, I'm referring this case to the district attorney's office for potential criminal charges. Reporters scribbled frantically. Cameras clicked. Court adjourned. As people began filing out, Esme rushed toward me, her face contorted. You've ruined everything. We're destitute because of you. No, I said quietly. You're destitute because you tried to steal what wasn't yours. Security stepped between us, but I wasn't finished. I leaned close to Esme's ear and whispered, There's no karma, just cause and effect. You wrote your ending the moment you decided to betray my father. In the hallway, reporters swarmed, shouting questions. Through the chaos, I saw Milton trying to slip away. Mr. Wilkinson, I called out. He froze. The Bar Association might be interested in your role in all this. He hurried away, leaving his briefcase behind in his haste. Outside the courthouse, Greta handed me a stack of papers. Property transfers are already being processed. The estate is yours, officially and completely. And them? I nodded toward Esme and her children, huddled miserably by their lawyer's car. Faith and Tyron are moving into studio apartments downtown. Esme, Greta smiled grimly. Well, the charity board's criminal complaint is just the beginning. My phone buzzed. Aaron sending a photo of the for sale sign being removed from the family estate's front lawn. Miss Bianca? A young reporter approached cautiously. Would you like to make a statement? I thought about all the statements I'd wanted to make over the years. About being sidelined in my own home. About watching my father slip away under Esme's influence. About my grandmother's quiet strength. No, I said simply. The truth speaks for itself. As we walked to the car, Greta squeezed my arm. Your grandmother would have loved this. She did love it, I said. She orchestrated it years ago. We just had to follow her plan. One last glance back showed me Esme being served with more papers, probably from the charity board. Faith was crying into her phone, likely begging friends for a place to stay. Tyron just looked lost. Ready to go home? Greta asked. Home. Not just a house anymore, but truly home again. Yes, I said. I think I'll have Martha make grandmother's favorite tea. We have some celebrating to do. The courthouse steps fell away behind us as we drove toward the estate. My estate. Where quiet strength had finally won over loud greed, just as my grandmother had always promised it would. Martha set the tea tray on my grandmother's favorite side table as I opened the final blue envelope Aaron had delivered. The paper inside was crisp, my grandmother's elegant handwriting as clear as if she'd written it yesterday. My dearest Bianca, I read aloud, if you're reading this, then everything has played out as we planned. A knock at the door interrupted me. Greta entered, carrying a thick manila envelope. You won't believe what just came across my desk. Try me. I gestured for her to sit. Publishing house. They want your story. 6-figure advance. She pulled out a contract. Apparently, Someone leaked the courthouse drama to a literary agent. I set my grandmother's letter aside. Not interested. What? Bianca, this is huge. People love justice stories like this. This was never about publicity, I said, picking up my tea. It was about setting things right. My phone buzzed, a news alert. I opened it to find Esme's face plastered across the local news website. Local charity board chair arrested for embezzlement. Saw that coming, Greta said, helping herself to tea. Faith and Tyron. Faith's working as a receptionist downtown. Tyron's selling insurance in the next state over. I closed the article. They're learning to live without trust funds. And the properties? The rental homes have good tenants who deserve stability. I'm keeping them affordable. I smiled. Grandmother always said real estate should shelter people, not just wealth. Martha appeared at the door. Miss Bianca, Mr. Aaron is here. Aaron walked in, still in his worn blazer, carrying a familiar wooden box. Found this in your grandmother's safety deposit box. Thought you might want it now. Inside the box lay photographs, dozens of them. My father as a young man, laughing with my mother. Me as a baby cradled in my grandmother's arms. Family moments. Esme had tried to erase, preserved perfectly. There's more, Aaron said, pulling out a small key. Your grandmother left instructions about the study. We walked to my father's old study together. The key fit a hidden panel behind his desk, a compartment I'd never known existed. Inside lay another letter, this one in my father's handwriting. He wrote it before he got sick, Aaron explained. Your grandmother made sure it was safe. My hand shook as I opened it. My dearest daughter, I read, if you're reading this, then I failed to protect you. But your grandmother didn't. Greta squeezed my arm as I read silently. My father's words. His real words, not the ones Esme had forced him to write, filled the page with love and regret. He knew, I said finally. He knew what she was doing, but he was too sick to stop it. That's why your grandmother set everything up, Aaron said. She promised him she'd make it right. A noise from the hallway made us turn. Martha stood there with a small package. This just arrived for you, Miss Bianca. Inside was a worn leather diary, my mother's. A note from my grandmother's lawyer explained it had been held in trust, to be delivered only after the estate was secured. Your grandmother thought of everything, Greta said softly. No, I corrected her. She taught me everything. About patience, about justice, about being strong without being cruel. I walked to the window, looking out at the garden where I'd played as a child, where my grandmother had taught me chess and cards and the quiet power of waiting. The publishing house called again, Greta said. They're very persistent. Tell them no. I turned back to the room, to the study that now held no bitter memories, only heritage. Some stories aren't meant for everyone. Speaking of stories, Aaron pulled out one final envelope. The charity board wanted you to know. They're renaming the foundation. After your grandmother. I smiled, thinking of Esme's face when she'd hear that news in her jail cell. Miss Bianca? Martha appeared again. Will you be taking dinner in the dining room? Yes, I said. Set 3 places, and use grandmother's china. As Martha left, Greta raised an eyebrow. 3? You 2 are staying, I said. Family dinner. Real family. We settled into the dining room as evening fell, sharing stories about my grandmother, about justice, about quiet victories. The house felt warm, lived in, loved again. They tried to take my home, I said, raising my glass. They ended up giving me their future. To serenity, Aaron said, using my grandmother's name for the first time. To serenity, Greta echoed. I touched my glass to theirs, watching the sunset paint the dining room gold. Outside, the garden my grandmother had planted bloomed bright and strong, just like the legacy she'd left behind, just like me.